Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content. Hey, what's up? Welcome to QnA, the show where I take your questions and answer them here in video format. A ton of questions to get into, so let's just jump into it. First question comes from Sad99. Hit me with the long one. Says Q, hypothetical here. If we have a tough 6 games of the year, I don't think anybody should be surprised at the start of the season. What is the philosophy of the team for the rest of the year? The way I see it, if we're sitting around 1-5 those games, and any thought of a miracle this season is most likely gone if it wasn't already. Obviously, we don't throw the season or anything, but how does the front office switch gears after this? How does the front office use the rest of the season to our advantage? And what slight changes will they make to gear us up for next year? Experimentation they can do. This is one of the more interesting things to look forward to this season, as always. So Sad brings up a great point, right? The Browns' schedule to start the year is absolutely brutal. It's a tough start to the season. Now, Cincinnati, let's say that's a winnable game, right? Cincinnati doesn't play well at the beginning of the season. The Browns tend to play well versus the Bengals, right? That feels winnable. At Baltimore, look, the Browns are good to split Baltimore. I talked about this with my guy Engraven before on this channel. And like he mentions, the Browns are kind of a thorn in the side for the Ravens because like the Browns will find a way to win, especially in the Stefanski era. So, you know, I wouldn't count the Browns out entirely in that week 2 game. Baltimore can get off to some funky starts as well. But let's say we are in that scenario, right, where the Browns only win one of these first 6 games, and it's a brutal stretch. It really depends what they do week 6, week 7, week 8, because if they go into the bye week and they win against Miami, which is definitely possible, and they beat the Patriots, they would be, 3-5 at that point? And all of a sudden, the season don't feel that hopeless anymore, right? You're 3-5, you play the Jets, you get the 4-5, and you split with the Ravens. You can say to yourself, we get to 5-5. It's not unrealistic. And then you play the Raiders, and you're thinking to yourself, you can get to 6-5. So I don't think a 1-5 start is going to put this team automatically and give up on the season mode. I think we're talking about much, much later in the season, that being the case. Like if the Browns get to the bye week, and let's say they get to the bye week, 2-6, and then they lose to the Jets, 3-6, 2-6, 2-7, and then they lose like week 11, they lose to the Ravens, and by week 11, they're 2-8. That's when the Browns will have to make some strategic decisions about the rest of the year, right? Because 2-8, I mean, you got to win out to go over 500. The odds are you ain't going to have a great season at that point. So I think you would have to wait till much longer for the Browns to really shift gears and, you know, make any, as Andrew Berry calls it, strategic pivots. There's also another factor at play here, right? And this is the overwhelming thing. This is the overriding thing kind of looming over the Browns season. What can ultimately change the Browns' plans for this year and cause a strategic pivot is what goes on Saturday at the quarterback position, right? Let's say because like Arch Manning hasn't done anything yet, but let's be real about what the situation is. His name is Arch Manning. That is a brand to NFL GMs at the quarterback position that has never failed them. So if Arch Manning is looking amazing, let's say Arch Manning wins the Heisman, right? And it's looking like he's going to win the Heisman. Now, I'm not saying that's what Arch Manning is going to do, but in this hypothetical, let's say that's what Arch Manning is doing. That's going to cause a lot of teams early in the season to do a strategic pivot. Right. If it looks like there's going to be 3 Heisman candidates at quarterback, legitimate Heisman candidates at quarterback, right? Not just like, oh, you had a good year, you're on the best team in college football, we'll put you in the voting, kind of like what they did with Dylan Gabriel last year. But like legitimately, like Lenore Sellers is in the Heisman conversation, Clay Klubnik's in the Heisman conversation, and Arch Manning is in the Heisman conversation. You can insert whatever 3 quarterbacks you want. And those are the 3 guys. They're all going to declare for the draft. You have good intel that they're going to declare for the draft. And you're 1-5. You know what I mean? Like it depends, and they really don't depend on nothing at that point, right? Like the writing's on the wall for what the Browns will do at that point, which is prioritize getting youth a chance to play. Especially depending on what the Jacksonville Jaguars are doing too. Because if the Jaguars are just as bad as us, and we're both sitting at 1-5 in the first 6 weeks, then we might have less incentive to have to tank because we're like, oh, we're both going to have good picks at that point, which is going to be able to net us something. But yeah, I think a lot of the strategic pivot stuff would be much later in the year when we're kind of through the college football season. We know what we have in that quarterback class more than less, versus like in the first 6 weeks of the season. I think there's still a lot that can be changed out there. But the one wild card that can really sway a lot is if there is a abnormal amount of blue chip quarterback prospects that look like they'll be available at the top of this draft. The Browns would be foolish at that point to ignore it. Like, I'm not a big fan of tanking. I think tanking has its own issues. Like, it's hard to build a culture when you're tanking. Unfortunately, the Browns might not even have to be in a position to tank. But this team's biggest issue, everybody knows it, is quarterback play. And if it feels like there's an answer at the top of the draft with quarterback play, maybe some of the guys who aren't established veterans on this team will understand. But like Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward, these guys who understand their biggest problem right now is they don't have a quarterback. And let's say they get through camp and they don't feel great about any of these rookies. They gonna understand you gonna have to do what you got to do at that point. Nobody's gonna be excited about it. I'm not gonna be happy about it, but like, let's be real here. This is stuff that people have been asking the Browns to do for decades. Whenever it's like, oh, Andrew Luck's coming out, we get the 3rd pick instead of like the 1st or 2nd pick, where there's quarterbacks available. Like, you know, that's gonna be the awkward part of this season. And the interesting part of this season is like, hey, man, how good are these quarterbacks? Because, like, I don't think the Browns will tank if there's only 1 quarterback available. I don't think the Browns will tank if there's only 2. But I think if we get the 3 blue chippers in this class, the Browns will absolutely do what they got to do. Because, like, it's hard to get the first 2 picks in the draft. You got to be really, really bad. Like, think about everything that happened to the Browns last year in order for them to get the number 2 pick in the draft. And even then, the Browns had to get pretty lucky at the end of the season to get the number 2 overall pick. They were, like, slotted at the 5 or 6 pick for the longest. So you have to be really bad to get those. But, like, once you up the odds, so there's a 3rd team available, it just makes so many more opportunities there because it'd be pretty easy for 2 teams at the top of the draft to need a quarterback and be in a position to take a quarterback. But 3 teams, odds are you're going to get 1 team in that bunch that wants to move out, you know, and extract some resources from that selection. So, yeah. It's a bit of a numbers game. There's a lot that goes into it, and I don't think just what the record is going to determine it. I think there's going to be so many other factors at play that play into that decision. So hopefully, I know it was a pretty long answer, but I feel like it was a sufficient one. So hopefully that is satisfying. Jalen says, what up, Q? Your prediction of wins and losses this year. The Browns have a gauntlet to run this year according to the strength of schedule. Yeah, I mean, the Browns always have a tough schedule. They play in the AFC North. We're never going to have an easy one, even if you finish in 4th place. It's just what it is. 7-9 wins. I think they're going to be a 7-9 win team. That's what they feel like right now. It's a 7-9 win team. Probably leaning more towards the under 500 portion of that than the over 500 portion. My reasoning is I just don't trust that we're going to be able to create the offensive consistency in order that's necessary to go over 500 when you're playing the way the Cleveland Browns are doing. And also the Browns have a huge question mark at the kicker position, which I think greatly affects their chances to go over 500. Dustin Hopkins can be super reliable, and that changes things and makes me more likely to put them there over 500. But I don't have any faith in him. I don't know what Andrew Smite's going to be in the NFL. He was pretty good in the UFL. But I don't know how that kicking competition is going to roll out, who's going to win it. All that's a big question mark. And I think in order to play the style of football that you want to play, you got to have somebody you trust at quarterback. Right now, we don't even know who's going to play at quarterback. And you got to have a really good run game. Right now, both of our main running backs are rookies, so big question mark there. You got to have a really good offensive line. Right now, we don't know what that offensive line is going to be. And you have to have a strong kicking game. And right now, I don't know what that kicking game is going to be like, on top of having a great defense, where I'm pretty sure the Browns going to have a good defense. It's just all the offensive stuff that you need to win that way and go over 500, and for me to feel comfortable predicting you to go over 500, huge question marks right now. Maybe by the time we get closer to the season, I feel way better about it. Maybe by the time we get 4 weeks in the season, I feel way better about it. But as of right now, it's hard for me to predict over 500. Luke says, hey, since Gabriel had a great run with Oregon and was a Heisman finalist, why do you not like him? Is it size or the play? His tape's not terrible, and I think his tape is actually pretty solid. But the issue with him is that he's 5'11". And look, I'm not on the side of get rid of this guy, he's too short, right? But here's the thing. I could be a fan of Kyler Murray. I was a huge fan of Russell Wilson coming out. But the difference between those two guys and then Dylan Gabriel is Dylan Gabriel does not have that athletic ability that puts him over the top in the way that Russ has, in the way that Kyler Murray has, right? My thing with being a short quarterback is you can definitely do it if you're 5'11". It's possible for a 5'11" man to be a good quarterback. Mike Vick was not that much taller than 5'11", but he was also Mike Vick. You feel me? Right? So, I just don't understand how people can ignore that whole part of it. Is Dylan Gabriel a good athlete? He's a fine athlete. He's slippery. He's a little slippery, right? But he's not an insane athlete. In order to survive in the NFL at that position, at that size, you need to be one of the better athletes in the game. It's not good enough to be a decent athlete. You got to be one of the best athletes on the field. It's like any sport, right? We see this in basketball. We know this is true in football. You have to compensate. You have to compensate for size with insane athletic ability in football and basketball. We understand this. It's not any different at the quarterback position. Dylan Gabriel can be 5'11". That's fine. But does he have the athletic ability or some insane arm talent to be able to make up for it? No, he doesn't. And that's why I'm not very high on him. His tape's fine, but having good tape at Oregon is a lot different than doing that same thing when TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith are rushing the pass with Cam Hayward up the middle. When you're going up against Trey Hendrickson, when you're going up against the Baltimore Ravens, it's not the Big Ten. And that's no disrespect to the Big Ten. One of the best conferences, if not the best conference in college football. But in the Big Ten, maybe throughout the course of the year, you play 2 or 3 top 5 picks on the defensive line. And that's a good year for the Big Ten. The Browns, they're going to play top 5 picks like every week. Some of the most incredible athletes you've ever seen every week. You're spared from playing Myles Garrett because he's on your team, but just the level of difference between college and NFL is so significant. And if you want to be successful at that height in the NFL, you got to bring something spectacular to the table. And Dylan Gabriel is a, slightly above pedestrian athlete. He has slightly above pedestrian arm strength, but that doesn't make up for him being way below average height for a quarterback. So that's why I'm not a big fan of him, right? It's not just that he's short. If he ran 4.3 and he was that small, I'd be all right. Let's see what he can do. But he don't run 4.3. right? Like he runs, I don't know, he didn't run in the 40. So I don't think it's a pretty impressive time, right? He's not like, and you can just tell by when you watch him, he's a good athlete. He's not like Russell Wilson. Go back and watch Russell Wilson in Wisconsin. For those of y'all who don't understand just how great of an athlete Russell Wilson was back in the day. Russ used to teleport. That ain't Dylan, right? And that's my thing. You want to be 5'11", that's fine. You just got to bring something spectacular to the table to make up for your lack of size. And Dylan just does not possess anything spectacular that he brings to the table, which makes me very skeptical about his ability to translate to the NFL. And it's not just Dylan I did this for. I was not a fan of Bryce Young for the exact same reasons. I was proven right on Bryce Young for at least the first couple of years of his career for those reasons. Now, Bryce Young is still one of the most amazing improvisers we've ever seen in college football. So that makes him a lot different than Dylan Gabriel. Like, no, don't make this like I'm conflating Dylan Gabriel with Bryce Young. Bryce Young is 10 times the player in college that Dylan Gabriel ever was. And that's not a disrespect to Dylan. It's just Bryce was one of the best college quarterbacks we've ever seen. And even Bryce, because he's not a spectacular athlete at the height that he has, struggles at the quarterback position to make that transition in the NFL. And he's as equipped to do it as anybody, except for he's just not an elite athlete. So I think that matters. Hunter says, what changes do you think need to be made to the defense to return to 2023 form? Obviously, they were on the field a ton. I think that has a lot to do with it. But do you think changes made schematically, or does it bring in new guys in front seven? I think it's simple with the Jim Schwartz scheme. The better the defensive line, the better the output from the defense. I don't think there's really much complicated about what they do schematically. Like, you can make some adjustments here and there, but it's really all predicated on how fast can I get pressure on your quarterback. That is what's going to determine most of what's going to be successful for the Cleveland Browns defense. All right. Sam says this. Hey, Q, I'm curious how your coverage of this team on this channel how this has changed my fandom, and has covering the Browns have made you hope and cheer for different things. How has my perspective has changed? So this is an interesting question, right? You know, because your relationship with the team does change when talking about the team is your job, right? I always say this to people who want to do stuff online or want to make videos online. Be careful with what you're going to put out there as a product online, because whatever you put out there, once you put it out there, it no longer belongs to you. It belongs to the people of the internet, which is to say, if I made videos about every interest I have, then it's no longer just an interest that I have. It's an interest that I have to share with everybody, right? Things that I usually would not care about, I have to have an opinion about because I cover the Browns, right? Certain writers that I would never care to read, I have to pay attention to because those people have enough sway over public opinion that, it's important to know what they're saying to be able to diffuse it if it's something that I think is stupid. So yeah, it does change my interaction with other Browns fans for sure. It does change how I root for the team. Not like, I don't know if it really has changed how, because I watch the games. I want them to win. I don't get super caught up in being right or wrong about something. I think that's where a lot of people who do this job make the mistake of, like, their ego gets so goddamn big that they want to be right and validated all the time. Hey, look, man, there are times when the Browns have, like, successfully proven me wrong on stuff, and I've been happy to see it. I don't give a damn. I'm just offering you what I think, my educated opinions. But sometimes that shit can be wrong, and okay, like, if it's wrong, it's wrong. As long as the team's winning, I'm happy. So I don't fall into that trap. I think it is easy to fall into that trap and become, kind of obsessed with what you think can happen. I'm sorry, my cat is just terrorizing the video shoot. But but yeah, I think that kind of thing can change how you root for the team. The amount of input I have to take in is a lot more. But other than that, right, other than the Browns being kind of my job, I don't know. I've just been doing this so long that I haven't really thought about what it was like before. Like, I gotta be live during the games. Sometimes losses do sit with you a little bit longer because if the Browns have a bad 4 weeks, it's gonna be a rough 4 weeks to cover the team, and also financially, the numbers won't be as great as you would hope the team to be. So yeah, it's a bit more intense, I would say, because you're more tied to the results of the team than you are if you just watch the team on Sunday. Winning really affects me positively. Losing affects me more negatively. Now that this is my job, because I know there are real world consequences for me when the Browns win or lose a lot, that matter, right? That matter to how I make a living. So I guess that's a lot more intense too. Thank you for the question, Sam. Rebecca says, no, I didn't put up this one again. Rebecca says, hi, Quincy. They say it's best to let rookie quarterbacks sit and watch at the beginning. What is it that they learn and gain that can't be gained by watching tape? Here's the number one thing I think that cannot be learned by watching tape or by playing in the preseason or even getting first team reps. Just how fast, physical, and violent the NFL game is. Like standing on the sideline, watching that game, like it's one thing when you're like, you're like in the club section at the stadium or you're sitting all the way up top. You don't really get a good grasp for just how fast and physical things are going. But like if you've ever been able to get close to field level, right? Like I've only been field level for practice. And even then that was a forever altering experience for me because it was shocking how fast everything went down, right? And that's just practice. So I think that's important, right? Just so you can be able to just see, okay, this shit happens fast, right? It is happening way faster than you think it is on tape. Because on tape, it doesn't look that fast, but it's happening very fast, right? Also, you get to observe game day operation if you're a rookie watching that. So when the quarterback makes a mistake, when the quarterback throws a touchdown, what's happening on the sideline? What's expected of you? Who's calling in? Who are you going to be working with the most? Who's giving you your sideline pictures? All of that kind of stuff, right? Adjustments when they come in. How are they coming in? Are they coming in through the headset? Shador or any rookie's going to probably have a green dot on their helmet, so they have the radio in their ear while they're watching the game, so they know what's coming in through that headset, what's being expected, what does the coach not tolerate, what pisses coach off. You get to kind of get a feel of what the work environment is actually like before you have to get started. Now, I don't think a player necessarily needs a whole year of this kind of experience, but I do think a month or two of this is good for any rookie quarterback before they step in, because like it's like trying to start a job immediately day one. It's like if you got a job as a barista at Starbucks and your first day they're like, all right, get in the hotline, and you out here trying to make people's frappuccinos and cappuccinos and lattes and flat whites and all the Americanos and all this shit in the middle of the morning rush while everybody's trying to get out and go and get their coffee, and you got to look at the binder to figure out what everything is and what buttons you need to press and how long you need to let the espresso shake out. Like that's the kind of stuff that's more relatable to folk. Is just you gotta just observe the chaos before you jump into the chaos and really understand what people are doing to make their lives easier. Get some reps in at some less busy times. Ease your way in so that when you are in rush hour, yeah, it's gonna be a little bit of a ramp up, right? It's gonna be a little shocking because your first time dealing with it, but you have other experience to lean back on that's not just being thrown into the hell of it. So that's the best way I can explain it that would make sense to everybody, because I think we've all, most people have worked a fast food job, right? It's usually most people's first job, or, maybe you've worked as a barista, or maybe you're a bartender. And you don't just get thrown into the most busy shift day one and just be like, oh, let's see if he can sink or swim, right? Or she can sink or swim. It's more of a let's work you in, let's get you right. And then 3-4 weeks later, maybe they trust you to be in that, right? That's kind of what it's like. Except for imagine it's football and it's much more dangerous and it's much more complicated because you're going up against the best football players in the world and not just Dale who comes in for a Frappuccino at 8 in the morning like a sicko. By the way, I don't know if anybody here is ordering Frappuccinos super early in the morning, but I need you to understand that we think you're sick when you do that. As a former Starbucks employee, I was always like, who does that at 8 in the morning, man? You're just gonna be in the bathroom all day, the rest of the day, ordering a Trenta fucking Frappuccino at 8 a.m., man. Like you are a terrorist to wherever you work, because that is just awful. All right. Thank you for the question, though, Rebecca. Next one comes from Richard. Richard says, hey, Q, I seem to remember issues between Flacco and Tillman in 2023. If I'm remembering correctly, the Bears game had a couple interceptions, Tillman's direction. That wasn't, there's some sideline stuff during the Jets game that season. Love the show. Go Browns. Yeah, I think the issues Cedric Tillman had in 2023 weren't quarterback specific. I remember Deshaun being upset with him a good chunk of the year. Basically, any veteran quarterback. Cedric had a hard time figuring out the playbook in year one. To his credit, those issues didn't seem to pop up with the same frequency in year two. So maybe that's something that he's figured out. And I think Joe Flacco understands. He was dealing with a rookie at that point. Now he's dealing with a third-year player. So I don't think that's going to be something that sits on Joe Flacco's mind and he punishes Cedric Tillman for. I would hope not. Terry says, how many of these rookies do you anticipate being solid starters? I think there's a good chance 4 of them work out. Graham, Schlesinger, Judkins, Fannin. If we can get 4 starters out of one draft, I think that sets the Browns up for a lot of success if we can find a QB. Am I being too optimistic about a rookie class? I don't think so. When you draft as many players in the top 100 as the Cleveland Browns, I think you want at least 3 of them to become real starters for you, or 4 of them to become real rotational guys for you, at least 4 of them to become that. The expectations for this rookie class are going to be very high because it's a lot of stuff that the Browns put into this rookie class, right? 2 second-round picks, 2 third-round picks, a first-round pick, like in the top 5. So yeah, I think the Browns fans are right to expect a lot out this rookie class. And I don't think that's an unfair expectation. Braxton Strickland says, hey, Q, I know this is super unlikely, but in the crazy world, what if everything goes our way and the Browns are undefeated by the bye week? Joe at the helm, there's no sign of drop-off. What would the Browns do? Do you think, or what the Browns should do? Try to push and add pieces for the postseason, or still put in rookies to see what we have? I think you just ride out Joe until the wheels fall off, right? Assuming that the wheels will fall off at some point. If the wheels don't fall off with Joe, then you take a good season. You win your 11 games. You hope Jacksonville didn't win that many games. And then you kind of just move on as necessary. I don't think the Browns would be having a successful year and decide to tank it unnecessarily. If Joe Flacco wants to turn back the clock and turn into 2012 Joe Flacco and the Browns have a great defense, you write that out as long as you can and see where it can take you. I mean, I know there's some people out there, a niche group of people out there would be mad that the Browns aren't tanking, but realistically, nobody's going to be upset if the Browns win 10 games. And what you're describing, it sounds like the Browns will win a lot more than 10 games. You know what I mean? And they can figure out with their 2 first-round picks and their war chest of draft picks that they could throw at trying to get a quarterback, how they can get there. You know what I mean? So that, to me, wouldn't be too difficult of a scenario for them to get through. I think they'd be happy to deal with that. Daryl says, we obviously have low expectations, but people don't realize how our offense wasn't just bad last year, it was utterly incompetent. I agree. Philly only beat us by 4 with Deshaun. We beat Baltimore. The end of the season was a gentleman's punt. Can we shock the world and make a run if the run game and the defense are back? And of course, the passing game is at least productive, and shock the world and make the playoffs and win 1 game? I don't think it's the most ridiculous thing in the world that the Browns could make the playoffs. I don't think it's something that you should predict. But in the world that you're saying, like the Browns run game's productive, the quarterbacks are productive, whoever's out there. And let me add one more thing, right?
the kicking is consistent. If our field goal kicking is consistent, then yeah, this defense could be good enough to where the Browns can win a bunch of games and make the playoffs, maybe even win a playoff game depending on who they draw in the first round. I wouldn't be shocked if that were the case, but I think a lot has to go your way in order for it to happen, is why I don't feel comfortable predicting it and why it would be shocking, right? Because you're talking about the quarterback position figuring itself out, the run game figuring itself out, and then also kicking figuring itself out. And all three of those things for the Browns last year were abysmal. So that's something to think about. Big Bird says, are Barry and Stefanski's jobs safe after this season? Still give them a chance to draft the QB they want next year, or is it the outcome where both are fired if they go like 3-14 again, for example? I always say this when it comes to coach firings. The journey gets you fired more than the result. There are ways that the Browns can finish with 10, 11 wins and somehow Kevin gets fired. Not really this year, but there are ways you can get fired after a 10-win season. There are ways you can win 3 games and not get fired. We've seen it before too. The win-loss record usually is a footnote in why a coach gets fired more than the driving force behind it, as crazy as it sounds, right? Expectations get coaches fired more than anything. If your team, like the Dallas Cowboys, is expecting to win a Super Bowl every year and you don't come close to that, but you're getting to the playoffs consistently, well, you're going to get fired, right? If you're a team that people aren't expecting much out of and you win 6 games, you're not going to get fired from that. So it really does matter what the expectations are for the Browns by the time the season starts and how well Kevin lives up to those expectations, and also understanding that expectations are fluid throughout the season. Depending on how the Browns perform, expectations might jump all the way up here. And then the Browns play in a way that completely betray those expectations. Or, the Browns can start 1-6 and expectations are at the floor. And then they finish out strong. They have a lot of close games down the stretch, and maybe they only win 2 of those games. They end up with a 3-14 record. But boy, did they almost beat a bunch of teams that were going to be in the playoffs, and we can see just how not far away we are if we just get a quarterback. And oh, by the way, 3-14 get you a quarterback. I don't think he'd be fired in that scenario. So I think it matters a lot more just what exactly is going on at that point of the year more than what that record is, because I don't think the record itself is the only indicator of whether somebody get fired or not. But that is it for Q&A. Y'all have a great day, a great rest of your night. Say hello to your co-host, because she did not want to get out the frame today. But y'all have a great day. Have a better night. Peace.